Dello heavy-duty engine oils. Proven engine protection at prices you can rely on, giving you even more reasons to choose Dello. Today we're here to talk about Case's 580 EV. That is the electric backhoe that Case has on the market. We actually went out and reviewed this piece of equipment, and I have to say, I'm pretty stinking impressed. So without further ado, we're gonna cut over to my conversation with the Case representative as we walk around the machine and talk about some of the subtle differences and what you're gonna notice about the new Case 580 EV.
Right, so this is our 580 EV backhoe loader. It's electric product, electric battery, so it's got a 400 volt battery system in it and 2 electric motors that are tied to that with a traditional transmission as well. Okay. So it's got a direct drive power shift transmission that's tied into one of the electric motors, and then the second electric motor is for all the hydraulics, whether it's for the loader or for the backhoe.
Okay. Battery storage looks, when I was kind of initially walking up, looks like it's low on the machine, or is that what's under the hood?
Right, so the batteries are actually located behind this side panel here.
Okay.
There's 2 batteries stacked on top of each other with a small gap in between them for cooling purposes.
Okay.
And that's right underneath the hood. The hood design is completely changed from what you'd see on a 580 Super N, which would be the equivalent diesel model.
Okay.
The hydraulic tank used to be on the other side of the unit,
Yep.
and this side was the diesel fuel fill. So no need for that anymore. So now we brought the hydraulic tank on this side, and then the battery management system components are where the tank was before.
Gotcha. Okay. So when it comes to the performance characteristics of this compared to the diesel counterpart, was the goal to build it pretty on par with the diesel model, or kind of take advantage of the oomph that electric offers, and do you have some performance gains?
Right. So the goal was to build a ground up new unit. Okay, and that's what we started with. As far as specs goes, that is one area where we wanted to have equivalent specs. So if you look at the specs of this machine, you'll see the same performance specs as the 580 Super N.
Okay. And then when it comes to runtime, I know there's the big electric conversation, there's job time, but there's runtime.
Right.
What's your runtime on
Right,
this?
yeah, that is by far the number one question we get is what's the runtime on the machine? We say 4 to 8 hours, and it's a range for a reason. It depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you're operating the backhoe, you're gonna get the longest time because it draws the least amount of energy. So you get closer to that 8 hours. If you're roading the machine, particularly if you're roading up hills, or if you're doing loading work, loading trucks, for example, that's going to actually burn the battery a little bit faster. So then it's going to be closer to 4 hours. We're also figuring in idle time with that.
Okay.
A backhoe is more of a utility type machine nowadays, not like it was 20, 30 years ago. A lot of municipalities and utilities are interested in electric backhoe, and the run times are actually 30 to 50% of the time it's idling.
Yeah. So on this unit, is it like other electric units that are coming out? When you're in idle, does the system kind of go quiet and you're conserving that charge, or does this still have functions running that you're going to continue to draw that battery down?
I wouldn't say the battery draws 0, but it's near 0.
Okay, so you're not wasting with a pump just running for no reason.
The pump's at standby mode. There's a little bit of movement of the pump. At 25 minutes, it'll go into a deep sleep, and then you're not drawing any energy at all. But it's essentially near 0. There's a little bit of draw coming from the cluster, but a very small amount.
Super small.
Just to keep that running.
Okay. What are your charging options for it?
So the nice thing about this machine is we did go with the automotive style charging system. So it's a J1772 plug, level 2 charger that would charge this machine. So it's anywhere from like 208 volts to 240 volts is that range that you'd want to have coming out of the wall. And then 50 amps is what the charge would be.
And roughly, we go from near 0 to a full charge. Roughly, what are you looking at time-wise?
0 to 100% would be 7.4 hours. So it's an overnight charge. 20 to 80% is 4.4 hours.
Okay, so over the course of a lunch hour, roughly, how much charge could you gain back? Assuming you were like at a municipality or something, the guys take lunch and they throw it on the charger.
It would be something in the range of like 15 to 20%.
Okay.
On this unit, we've gone to fully electro-hydraulic for both the front end of the machine as well as the backhoe. So that gives us a lot more capabilities. So within the display screen, which is new, we have an 8-inch display screen, which is the same screen we're using in our wheel loaders, our compact track loaders and skid steers. Well, within that touch screen, there's a lot more capability. So we have different loader functions. One example would be like a height limit. So you're operating your power lines, you're able to make sure that loader doesn't go up above a certain level.
So you can set up limits.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. Another new feature would be we have 4-corner multicolored strobe lights on here. So we have blue, white, green, and amber.
Okay. And so that's all in the module already, or do you pick at the time you're building the machine?
It's already standard equipment on the unit.
Yeah.
And then within the display screen, you can actually pick the colors. If you wanted 4 different colors on each one of the lights, you can do that.
Oh, very
You can also select the patterns. And then with the white color, if you wanted that on all the time to work as an extra set of work lights, you can do that as well.
Okay. And you said this is a traditional transmission setup. So we don't have anything like individual motors going to drive wheels or anything. It's essentially you're applying that power to the transmission. Transmission from there forward is just like the diesel machine.
Correct. So one of the nice things about the way we had this set up is from a control standpoint, we wanted it to be very similar to what we have set up for the pile control units. So a customer gets out of a 580 Super N or a 580 Super N wide track, they get into this model, they're not going to see a lot of differences from an operator control standpoint. And that goes with the drivetrain as well. So we have the traditional transmission on there. It's going to act like it would with any power shift transmission. Yeah. So you don't have like any of these abrupt stops that you may have like in an electric vehicle, for example.
Yeah, okay. Any other standouts?
Another change that we made on this one is we do have a reversible fan. It's similar to what we have on our wheel loaders or Minotaur, how it's set up in the display screen. Again, trying to keep that operator interface the same between product lines with case. So right below here, the hood here, we have the reversible fan. You can blow out the debris and dirt.
And this is just cooling the battery stack?
It's cooling the battery stack, and actually we should talk about the thermal management system. It is actively thermally managed and with different circuits. So we have different bottles of coolant fluids running through the systems. We have one dedicated to the batteries, another one dedicated to the battery management system, and so on. And it's trying to keep those components at their optimal level. And that'll actually be active whenever you have it plugged in. So you have it plugged in overnight, it's going to keep those batteries at that optimal level. So if it's cold out, like up here in Tomahawk, Wisconsin at times, if you have it plugged in, then it's going to keep it at the optimal temperature.
Is your hydraulic cooling up here as well? And is it going to actively heat your hydraulic oil in those cold temperatures, or is it really maintaining the battery system?
It's maintaining the hydraulics as well. So we have different circuits for the different systems of the unit, as well as the HVAC, for example.
So something to consider, if I leave this out on a job site in a cold climate overnight, not plugged in, it's going to actively use some of that battery energy to actively warm the components to keep the batteries in the optimal range and the hydraulic temperature in the optimal range.
Yeah, that's where your extra burn is going to be on your battery, is trying to keep it at the optimal level. There's a communication that And one other thing to talk about on the outside would be as far as the battery system itself. So we do have a low voltage system that actually gets the cluster fired up basically. And then once the cluster is fired up and the machine's turned on, then the high voltage system is active, and that will help keep the low voltage system charged up.
Okay.
But the nice thing about having that is if the low voltage batteries go dead, you can actually jump start the system and get going again. So that's not relying 100% on that.
Yeah, that was my next question is, can you jumpstart this with another vehicle, and can this be used to jumpstart other vehicles?
Yes, it can. There's a jumpstart terminal inside the compartment where we have the battery disconnect, and that's where the low voltage batteries are as well.
Okay.
And that's on the other side of the unit.
Gotcha.
The one thing I would say is we put all the bells and whistles on this unit as standard equipment. All the extra features we have on backhoes are included in these models. So comfort steer is an example. So for loading trucks, that's going to turn your steering wheel, will have half the amount of turns to make that go a little bit quicker for you.
Yep.
From an operator comfort standpoint, it's really helpful. It also adds to productivity.
Yeah.
Other features such as heavy lift on the Backhoe and power boost are standard on this as well. Auto ride control for the front loader. So it's pretty much fully loaded. Really the only optional items on this unit would be the front loader buckets. So we have a 4-in-1 loader bucket like we have here with clamshell, or you can do a standard loader bucket or a front hydraulic coupler where you could switch to different styles of buckets or have forks on there. And then on the rear, on the Backhoe, the only option that's available would be a hydraulic thumb or no thumb.
Okay.
This one doesn't happen to have the thumb on it.
But it is coming with the auxiliary hydraulics already plumbed.
Yep. Fully plumbed for 2-way auxiliary hydraulics on the back. So you have 1-way for a hammer, or you can switch it to 2-way if you have a thumb or something else like an auger that you want to run.
Now, is that a physical valve or is that done through the screen?
It's a physical valve.
Okay.
The keypad switches we borrowed off of our wheel loaders as well. Again, trying to keep, from a quality standpoint, use the same components from different product lines. So the keypad, there's a switch on there where you can switch between 1-way and 2-way.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's also, you can go into the screen and you can go in and make more infinite adjustments on a lot of the stuff.
Okay.
So say you wanted to change the flow that's going out to the hammer or the 2-way, you can do that within the screen.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
All right. Same thing for the front. We have a 3-spool valve, that's standard equipment. And again, you can make those adjustments within the screen.
Okay. And so the unit you were talking about behind you, this is the battery management unit here. And so what is the function of this? What do we need to worry about rubbing up against things? Maintenance wise, what's going on here?
This is what we were talking about before. The 2 batteries are in there. They're actually what I would call like a motorcycle style 12-volt battery.
So this is a 12-volt battery system.
12-volt battery system, yep. There's 2 of them in there. And then below here is the battery management system. One of our partners is Moog. A lot of the high voltage components are coming through Moog. They're in the aerospace industry, very advanced technology that they have. So they're one of our partners. And then our partner for the batteries is FPT.
Lithium ion batteries?
Lithium ion batteries, yes.
Okay. I guess if this is totally dead, what is that going to allow me to do?
You're talking about for the high voltage batteries?
Yes, the high voltage.
So the high voltage batteries, you would need to remove the drive shaft, just like you would with the diesel engine with our Backhoes. It'd be the same procedure. The drive shaft will come off, and then you would be able to move it.
Okay.
The other thing you could do though in the field is there's the option of using a generator.
Right.
Or there are portable transmission of electric power that's available. So you can get an electric power station that's portable brought out to the job site as well.
Gotcha.
A lot of times the question will come up about attachments.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is that we're fully compatible with all the attachments that we have on all of our N-series Backhoes that are available today. We are using biodegradable oil on all of our EV products. So the hydraulic oil is biodegradable.
Okay.
So when you're switching between attachments that are not biodegradable, you have to be a little bit careful of not contaminating the system.
So let me ask you this. You guys are shipping it with biodegradable oil, thinking about it from the customer side. Can it use traditional hydraulic oil? So if I've got a whole fleet of machines, instead of having to stock biodegradable oil for this one machine, and like you said, worrying about attachments, can it use traditional hydraulic?
Of course.
Okay.
So you'd have to drain all the biodegradable oil out and put fresh non-biodegradable oil on there, but you can do that.
Okay,
certainly.
it's not going to hurt anything in the system.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. From an operational standpoint, one important thing I would point out is one of those areas where we have a little bit more capability with this unit, because it being electro-hydraulic, is we do have sensitivity settings in there. So when you go to operate it, you can change the sensitivity settings on both the loader and the Backhoe.
Yeah.
From less aggressive to aggressive. Right when I got here this morning, it was in moderate. I moved it to aggressive, but you're free to move that to where you want to.
Okay.
Okay.
I do like that about all the new EH machines.
All right. One other thing to point out there too is you have 2 independent electric motors. I talked about that a little bit. Well, first of all, you can change those motor speeds. And basically there's 4 speeds. There's a standby speed, and then within the switch, there's 3 LED lights, so low, medium, high.
Now, you said you could change the settings on the electric motors. Is that you're going to change both of them with those 3 LED lights, or is it independent? You can change the 2 of them?
You can change them independent.
So if I'm going, for instance, to load into trucks, I've got an operator that's a little newer, a little slower. We could keep our drive electric motor down a little bit so it's not quite as aggressive on the throttle, but you can keep your hydraulic motor spooled up so that you've got quick responsiveness on your loader arms.
Right. You're going to want to keep your hydraulics at the high level,
Yep.
so you have the fast speed. And then the ground drive is controlled by your foot throttle.
Oh, okay. So we don't have a separate
Right.
button on that. I
Correct,
see.
correct,
So on the
correct.
button you're talking about with the LEDs, we're only adjusting the hydraulic.
Correct. It's for the hydraulic.
Gotcha.
One. Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yep.
Interesting.
So with that pointed out, I would say that what operators are going to find when they operate this unit, because we notice from the other electric products that we run or have out there on the market, is when contractors first get these units, the operators a lot of times don't do the best job in managing the battery itself, meaning that they burn through the battery pretty quick. There's a lot of advantages to the battery system. You have instantaneous torque throughout the RPM range, which you don't have with the diesel-powered engine. So what we've found is that after a week or two, after they're operating the unit every day, they're not burning through that battery so fast. So the reason I bring that up is just because you can set it to the highest and fastest setting, especially when you're running the Backhoe, doesn't mean you will actually want to do that. Because if you do it at a lower setting, say low or medium, you're going to get longer battery life. What we found is after customers have the units, they adjust how they operate to save the battery so they can go longer that day.
So let me flip something around on you.
Mm-hmm.
You say we can adjust our flow settings for attachments. That's going to be within
Mm-hmm.
your screen.
Right.
So let's say I'm running an attachment where I want a little more flow. So I dial that flow up, but on my 3 LED setting with my electric pump, I leave that down. Is it going to prioritize flow going out to the attachment to maintain that hydraulic flow?
Yeah, it's going to prioritize trying to get that flow to the attachment at that level you've set in there.
So on the motor speed with the LEDs again, we're talking about the hydraulic side. I'm assuming that's kind of taken the place of the old jog dial where you're changing your engine RPM to operate the back arm and attachments. Is that kind of the equivalent of what we're doing there?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Very equivalent.
So naturally, you're going to bump up to that next level if you're running a heavy duty
Right.
attachment or something.
Right. So,
Okay.
yeah, think about it from a diesel powered standpoint. It'd be very similar with the diesel engine. The difference would be on the diesel powered 580 Super N, for example, you have that hand dial that you would turn up the RPMs on the unit.
Yep.
In this case, we don't have the hand throttle, which has different settings. It's actually set RPM levels that you're doing. So
I see.
standby is at an RPM level, and then low, medium, high up to your highest RPMs.
Okay. Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it's not that much different than the hand dial. We just put pre-selected increments in there.
Yeah. Okay. I think it sounds more complicated talking about it than it
It
will
does.
be in
It really
practice in
does.
the machine. Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants.
These cranes work around the clock for months at a time. If one of these engines ever goes down, it costs more than our reputation. Switching to Delos 600 ADF, it's been a game changer. We've had no issues with clogged DPFs. I mean, no regen lights, no cleaning, no replacements, nothing. This oil goes beyond anything we've ever used. I choose proven protection that keeps our cranes on the job. I choose Delos 600 ADF.
When you're walking up to it, there's really not that big of a noticeable difference between the diesel counterpart and the electric variant. You're obviously going to notice things like the hydraulic tank is on the opposite side. There's no exhaust pipe. As a result of the way the machine is laid out and the heaviness of the battery packs, you don't have a front counterweight. But outside of these subtle differences, it's just a 580 Backhoe. And that's one of the things that I really have to say is a testament to the way Case implemented this technology. As we're in this transition period where the industry is used to diesel equipment and we are stuck in our rut and we really like our diesel stuff, Case, instead of going full bore electric, went, no, we're just going to throw some electric drive motors in there and we're going to step into this realm. And so that's made it very easy for contractors to be able to get this machine, and their current mechanic can do 80 to 90% of the work needed to the machine without ever having to get into the actual high voltage side of the machine. Transmission problems? No problem, it's just a 580 transmission. Hydraulic pump issues? It's just a 580 hydraulic pump. All of the rest of the machine is pretty much the same as the diesel variant, which means transitioning to this electric equipment will be substantially easier on contractors and municipalities. You have a very updated and refreshed cab. Instead of having buttons scattered all over the front dash, some over here on your side, you now have everything over here on a nice screen on your right hand side, complete with soft touch buttons, complete with customization. Now let's talk about some of the aspects of running the machine. I do love the way that this review ended up coming out, because when I went on site, I started in the electric backhoe. And so you get in the backhoe and you run it as an operator who hasn't been in a diesel backhoe in probably 4 or 5 years. And I immediately start picking apart small things like the way the transmission shifts and how loud the HVAC in the cab is, and just subtle things about the machine that I start to pick apart because, well, of course it's got to be related to the fact that it's electric. It wasn't until I went and ran the diesel counterpart after the fact that I went, hold on a second, let me go jump back in that electric backhoe. For instance, the transmission shifting. When you initially get into the machine makes a big deal out of shifting the transmission and sounds like it's hunting and pecking for gears. But it's only because, first of all, the machine was warming up and it was cold. But secondly, and more importantly, you're in an electric machine. You don't have the rattle and the harsh vibrations going through the entire machine from the diesel engine. You don't have all of the sound from the diesel engine. And so, of course, the transmission shifting is going to sound like it's a lot more dramatic. The HVAC fan, when I turned it on, blew me away at how loud the HVAC fan was. But in reality, it's the exact same loudness as it is in the diesel counterpart. You just can't hear it over the diesel engine. My overall takeaway is this machine really excelled in 2 areas specifically over its diesel counterpart. First and most obvious is sound.
Now, I will say, this is quiet. I mean, think about what it's like normally running the back end on a backhoe. Your diesel engine's generally screaming. This is just super quiet.
It is just so much more pleasant of an experience because you don't have all of this noise around you constantly. And as anyone who's run these machines for full 16-hour days knows, that's just mentally taxing to have that much sound all the time banging your eardrums. It makes for much better communication for my laborer down in the hole if I'm doing something that involves someone laying pipe, fixing water mains, something along those lines. Now we have clear communication without me having to yell or idle down the machine, idle it back up to work, idle down the machine, idle it back up to work. No, it's all gone. I can be working just fine and I can have a reasonable conversation with my laborer standing 15 feet away. The second and more impressive area where this machine excels is anything involving instantaneous power. Going uphill with a loaded bucket, you don't notice the lag and the bogging that you would notice in the diesel counterpart.
So here's the hill climb. She is downshifting. We are now in second. No problem going up the hill.
Obviously, with an electric drive motor, going into a pile, you have ample power from a creep. You don't have to run into the pile with your engine revved up because it's an electric motor. You have all of that torque and all of that power readily available to you as soon as you touch the pedal.
It's got a ton of power. I mean, it's exactly what you'd expect. This thing, I am pushing through this with no problem, and you can see that is a massive bucket. So the performance is there.
Also, when you're digging with the rear arm, if you're running in the hydraulic pump at the lowest setting, you still have all of the power you need like you would if the engine were revved all the way up.
So I'm currently digging on the lowest setting for the hydraulic pump. Plenty of power. You got no issue with power. It's really just the speed of the movement of the arm. This thing's still got a ton of torque on that motor because it's electric, so you're not suffering from the bogging that you would have maybe on the diesel counterpart because you're at a low engine RPM. We've still got ample power. There's no sluggishness to the hydraulics.
The fact that the hydraulics are completely independent of the drive motors means that I don't have to rev the engine up to get my hydraulics up to speed while declutching the engine and then trying to gently let off of that declutch so that we can gently roll into the truck without slamming into the side of it. It's all gone. I just keep my foot on the brake and gently creep up to the truck while I am pulling back on my boom arms, and I have full hydraulic flow because they're two independent systems. That doesn't sound like a lot, but again, when you get into these repetitive tasks, these are the small things that just make a huge difference over the course of a day to us in the cab. Now let's talk about some of the downsides to this machine. And there aren't many, in all honesty, there aren't many. Because at the end of the day, it's a 580 Backhoe that they've turned electric. But here's just a couple I noticed. The first one that you're going to notice right off the bat as you walk up to the machine is both the hydraulic tank and the battery maintaining module are lower than the hydraulic and diesel tanks that we're used to on the diesel counterpart. Now, this is actually right in line with competitors, and you're only talking a difference in ground clearance of those items, about 3 to 5 inches of difference. So it's not the end of the world. I don't suspect that I'm going to knock one of these modules off or really damage it just because of that 3 to 5 inch difference. But it is noticeable, and it is a drawback in my mind because, as we all know in the industry, we love that ground clearance for going over some rugged terrain. Now, the area where I really had some slight frustration with this machine is the startup time. If you initially go to start this for the first time in the day, or if it's been sitting for 15 to 20 minutes, the machine has to prep the batteries, get them up to temperature, start all of the computers. If I had to guess, you're probably around 20 seconds from the time you push the button to when the machine prompts you to push the brake to actually run the machine. Now, if the machine has been running, this startup time is substantially quicker, but it's still a little on the slow side. When we're used to just being able to turn a key, let the engine kind of do its thing, give it a couple seconds to build oil pressure, and then we can throw it in gear and move it. This feels a little sluggish, feels a little time consuming, and I would like to see some improvements on future iterations of the machine. Now, the final, and by far the biggest drawback to this machine, is the price tag. And unfortunately, with where we are in battery technology, electric equipment is unfortunately just going to be expensive. This machine is roughly double its diesel counterpart when it comes to the price tag. I know that's a tough pill to swallow. But like I said, with lithium-ion batteries being as expensive as they are, unfortunately the industry's just going to have to wait for the next leap in battery technology before we really see prices on this stuff start to come down. So overall, I can say this was an absolutely awesome machine to run. I had a great time in the machine, and it was 100% comfortable. I could see myself spending an entire day in this machine and not feeling the fatigue that you do from the diesel counterpart being 1, loud, and 2, vibrating the snot out of you all day. So thank you again to the Case team for having us out. I hope this helps you in your business. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Dirt.